and go live on our Facebook page as well. And this morning, we're talking with Jordan Miller. He is live. He is in the studio with us. Jordan is the Chief Assistant Prosecutor in Manistee County there. And Jordan has decided that he wants to throw his hat in for the Mason County Prosecutor position that is going to be open. We're in an election cycle. Lauren Kreinbrink, she's decided not to run for another term, and Jordan joins us this morning. Now, there are three candidates in for this position. A third candidate just the other day, and we know that two of the candidates will be joining us here on the air, and maybe the third candidate as well. But this is kind of that one-on-one opportunity. And in the studio with us is Jordan. Jordan, good morning, and thanks for coming in this morning.
Yeah, good morning to you, Chris, and hope you're feeling better.
Yeah, I am. Thanks. I just on the tail end of this cold, but glad to be back in the studio. Jordan, you have, I think, about 10 or a little bit over 10 years as an attorney in the area, top of your class at Valparaiso there, and have been with the prosecutor's office in Manistee for the last, I believe, 5 or 6 years. Is that an okay rundown at this point?
Yeah, pretty accurate. Coming up on 11 years, I think this May, of being an attorney, celebrating 5 years at the prosecutor's office in Manistee.
Okay. So let's I'll throw some and I'm not going to ask any really difficult questions. I want to make sure that we get to know you. We'll probably or hopefully have you back on later in the summer as we get closer to the election. But this morning we want to find out more about you. What drives you as an attorney, as the current prosecutor's office in Manistee, and why do you want to be the top law enforcement person here in Mason County? So let's start with what drives you as Jordan, the attorney / prosecutor.
Sure. So I knew from a pretty early age that I wanted to be a prosecutor, probably for reasons unknown to me at that time. But that was always something that I had in my mind when I went to school, when I attended law school. I had the good fortune of an opportunity becoming available in Manistee that I accepted, and but this is home, right? So this is where my family and I live. This is where we're raising our kids. This is where my wife was born and raised. And so at the end of the day, this is where I want to be. This is where I want my efforts to have the most impact. What drives me, I think, is just number one, I think, doing right by the citizens, helping people feel a sense of safety. That's very important, obviously, and especially in a small community. And just, again, I guess call it a moral compass, if you will, but just wanting to do good by the community and help keep them safe. And that's kind of what motivates me.
Top in your class, number one in your class, yes. There, which you get to hang your hat on. That's pretty impressive.
A lot of hours in the library.
Absolutely. What is your education? How has your education been able to be utilized here in Manistee County when you were here in Mason County? How do you take the education and your background there and bring it into our rural community here?
Yeah, so, well, it starts with me having come from a rural community myself. I grew up just east of here in a little town called Leroy. Went to Pine River High School. Yep. So this is not unknown to me. I mean, Mason County is very much like the county I grew up in. And in fact, I spent a lot of time in Mason County growing up, coming to Ludington, coming to the beach. And so it was just sheer happenstance that I happened to end up here by virtue of meeting my wife. But in a lot of ways, Mason County, and for that matter, Manistee County, mimic Osceola County, which is where I grew up. And so I have that background. Okay. In terms of the education, again, I always knew that I wanted to return home. I was never one that was thinking big city, big firm, big anything like that. I wanted to return home. I wanted to do something good for my community. And so that's how I always had that in the forefront of my mind when I was going through school.
Do you see, you've been in Manistee for almost 6 years, right? Five years?
Yep,
Okay.
Yep, 5.
Do you see that in some ways, Manistee and Ludington are kind of competitive, right? We in that spirit.
Sure.
But they're also similar when it comes to community, community pride, the values, the hometown feel. Do you see that you can bring in some similarities? And if so, what are those similarities from your current position if you are elected here in Mason County?
Yeah, absolutely. And they are the same in a lot of ways, as you stated. They do compete, surely. But when it comes to issues of crime and punishment, there's no competition there, right? Mm-hmm. We all are on the same page. We all want to see the same things. We want to see the community be safe. We want to get rid of drugs. We want to get rid of violent crimes. Manistee and Ludington are facing a lot of the same issues right now in terms of the fentanyl crisis, the drugs coming up from Muskegon and even further down south, mm-hmm. up that 31 corridor. And so, in my mind, when it comes to issues of crime and punishment and keeping the community safe, it is not a competition whatsoever. And in fact, I believe, at least, that I'll be able to use all the same experiences that I had in Manistee to help Ludington.
Let's talk about, and I do want to dive deeper into some of those scenarios, because you do have people, especially with social media, either with you or against you, in the sense we see that bonds get published online, convictions get published online, and without any sort of background or information there, it can be very difficult for you to do your job or accomplish that community backing, because I think that's important, right? To have the community back. How do you look at that, and how do you digest that or fix that in a sense?
Yeah, so it is tough, right? Because especially in small communities like this, you have Mason County, 3 prosecutors in the office, actually 2 right now that I'm aware of. We can't be everywhere at once. Mm-hmm. And so that does make it difficult sometimes to appear in court for arraignments when there are other things that we could and should be doing as well. Mm-hmm. So I think what it boils down to is you do have to have that balance. The community expects, especially when it comes to violent crimes, that you are going to be there, that you are going to make a pitch for what the appropriate bond should be. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, the prosecutor is not responsible for setting bond. It's the magistrate or the judge. Mm-hmm. But they do have to have all the facts. And so there are certain things that I've considered as to how to improve that system, whether it's appearing for every arraignment, or if that's not feasible, are there things such as bond motions or bond filings that we could file along with the complaint that gives the judge the information that he needs to set the appropriate bond?
Do you think that community perception, I don't know, we understand that it's not supposed to, and it shouldn't, but it doesn't affect a prosecutor's decisions and the path. But you do hear, they let them off easy, or just a slap on the wrist and such.
Yeah.
How do you address that with the community?
Well, I will start by saying that any prosecutor, especially any elected prosecutor, who says that they don't worry about the community input is not telling you the truth. Because, at the end of the day, we want to keep our jobs, right? And that's important. Yeah. And we are accountable to the public. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to be the elected prosecutor, that's just the name of the game. Okay. You have to be accountable to the public. Are there going to be disagreements? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. There are always going to be times when a decision is made that the public doesn't agree with. And that could be for many reasons: the strength of the evidence, the cooperation of the witnesses, what the witnesses and the victims actually want to see happen could sometimes differ from what the community expects. And so there is always going to be a fair amount of push and pull there, I think. But community accountability, I think at the end of the day, you have to not only take what's in the best interest of the case and the victim, but also what's in the best interest of the community.
Absolutely. Do you think it's a difficult job? And I know that's a kind of a generic question, but are you ready for this position? And what's the toughest part of it?
Yeah. Yes, it's an incredibly difficult job, but I am ready for it. As I've stated, I've had the benefit now of being an attorney for almost 11 years, 5 years as a prosecutor. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff that I don't wish upon anybody in their day-to-day lives. But with that experience comes a certain amount of wisdom that I think that I'm able to navigate, the waters, especially, in today's world. We have a lot of changes going on in Michigan, a lot of reforms. It's making the job of prosecutors much more difficult. And I think that I'm equipped to be able to handle that and navigate those waters.
Right. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Jordan Miller. He's vying for Mason County Prosecutor. There's three candidates in there. Lauren Kreinbrink, she's decided not to run again in that role there. So it opens up that seat. You've been a prosecutor, an attorney for 10 years. A combo there. You mentioned fentanyl. You mentioned the drugs as an issue here. If you had to, if somebody came up to you, and I'll ask you this question this morning, if you had to name the three top issues that you believe that are affecting us here in Mason County, what would they be? And the second question, do you think that the community understands that those are the three top issues? Do you mind exploring that with us?
Yeah, so if I had to say what I think the top three issues are, at least the top three reoccurring things right now,
Okay.
It's drug abuse, and I'll lump together methamphetamine and fentanyl. I'll use that as one. The second being domestic violence,
Okay.
and the third being drunk driving. Right, and drunk driving is going to be a problem anywhere you go, as is domestic violence these days, as is fentanyl. I do think the community is receptive to that. The residents of Mason County are smart. They see what's going on. It's right under their nose, right? It's happening every day to their loved ones. And so, yes, I absolutely do think that the community recognizes that those are our big three issues. And those are issues that are never going to go away. Don't get me wrong. But there are certain things that I think that can be done better to help address those issues.
Okay. Again, Jordan Miller joining us this morning. A couple other questions. Do you have some time? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
People are going to ask, as three candidates are vying for this, what distinguishes you from those others? You're familiar with those other candidates. You've worked with them. I've been in the same courtroom and the same meetings with them. Not that. And maybe it'll get a little bit more, and I use the word cutthroat as we get closer to election. Every election cycle, there's what he said and she said and so on and so forth. But you have to be able to distinguish yourself from those other candidates. And how do you do that this morning?
Yeah, and I'll start by noting that I have spoken with both Becky and Beth. And so, I think at this point, it is, everyone understands that it's a race, it's a competition, and so it's to be expected that where things are fair game, we will point them out. But I certainly don't intend this to be a mudslinging contest. I don't intend to disparage either one of them. I've gotten to know both of them on different levels over the years, both in my private practice when I was here in Ludington, as well as at the prosecutor's office. At the end of the day, I think what I would like to highlight and what I think separates me is that I think I have the perfect blend of the community sense, the community involvement, as well as the experience. I'm invested in this community. This is where we're going to be, regardless of the outcome of this race. My wife and I, this is where we're going to raise our children. And so I am invested in seeing Mason County do well, regardless of the outcome of this race. So you take that community sense and you compare it with the experience that I've now gained as a prosecutor in Manistee County and overall my experiences as an attorney. And I do think that gives me a good blend, a good vision for what this community needs going forward and how best to represent it.
All right. Before we wrap up, let's get to just a couple of specifics too. There's three areas I would love to focus on. First is communication. So one of the things that multiple media here in the area, including the radio station, has a concern that not as much communication coming out from the prosecutor's office so that we can keep the community up to speed on different cases, if it's high-profile cases, if it's something that happens. Sometimes things happen from the law enforcement standpoint. Press conference happens, information there, and then it just kind of gets swallowed, and we don't hear much about that. Do you foresee changing that sort of aspect, and how do you communicate? And it's not just from a radio station standpoint, newspapers, other resources here in the area.
Sure. I'll start by saying that I do understand it to a certain extent, right? That we do have, as attorneys, especially as prosecutors, an ethical constraint upon what we can and cannot say in the public. We can't try our case to the court of public opinion, right?
Correct.
A defendant is entitled to his constitutional rights, his or her constitutional rights, which includes the presumption of innocence. And we want to make sure, in the event that a case goes to trial, that their case hasn't already been undermined by us making public comments. So there is a certain sentiment, that we do need to be careful about that. But having said that, in a perfect world, we want to be, as I stated before, accountable to the public. And so with that comes the obligation to be forthcoming with information when it's requested and to, answer those tough questions.
Okay.
And so I do endeavor to do that, absolutely.
All right. A second part of this question is when it comes to, obviously you have law enforcement partners that you work with, Mason County Sheriff's Department, Ludington Police Department, others, Scottville, so on and so forth. It's Mason County Prosecutor. Is there any changes or any steps that you feel should take place to help the community understand that you're working better with them? Is there any sort of modifications that you foresee? And I know this is very on the infancy side of your campaign, but in the back of your mind, you have to work with them. Is there anything that you could see changing or getting better here in the county?
See changing, certainly at this point in the game, I think it would be too early to say, specifically. But I think the goal always is open line of communication, right? So law enforcement needs to know that the prosecutor's office is there for them, and vice versa. There needs to be an open dialogue. The law enforcement officers need to know that they can call me at any time, night or day, with questions that they may have, and vice versa, that I can be able to call them anytime I need something from them for a case. So that's part one. Part two, I think, is just education and training, right? So as the prosecutor, obviously, I possess a certain sense of education, a certain sense of training in courtroom skills, the legal side of things, that law enforcement officers don't have as much of, right? Because they're on the front lines, they're the boots on the ground doing the hard work, and so intersecting that then with training opportunities, coming to them when I spot an issue like, hey, I read this in a report and here's what I think could be done better. Again, just it comes down to dialogue, open communication, letting them know that they can trust in the decisions that I'm making, they can trust in my judgment, and they can come to me when they need something. Okay,
all right. And Jordan Miller joining us this morning. Not too difficult questions. Are we doing okay?
No,
You're doing
great.
all right.
Doing
all right.
Great.
Now, obviously, we see trends across the country when it comes to the way individuals are arrested, bails. We talked about bail, prosecuted as well. Do you see, and again, we're inundated with political stuff and everything else out there, but there is also an idea that we see some leniency with certain crimes and certain individuals. Do you see Mason County fitting in that mold that we hear throughout the country? Do you see it as rehabilitation kind of a county versus really tough on the individuals? Where do we fit into that mold?
Yeah, so I certainly think that there is room, there is space for rehabilitation, right? Because at the end of the day, we do want to ensure not only that someone is held accountable and punished, we also want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And I'll use drug crimes as a perfect example. In Manistee, at least, we have been somewhat successful with sobriety court. Okay. And those are typically for drunk driving offenses more so than drug offenses, but the concept is the same. And what happens in those cases is that individual is prosecuted. They are held accountable, but at the same time, they are offered an opportunity to address the underlying issue. Okay. And what we've seen in Manistee County is that sobriety court has been wildly successful in terms of reducing recidivism, cutting down reoffending. And I think those same concepts can be applied here. To the best of my knowledge, at least when I was practicing here, Mason County did not have any treatment courts, and so I do think that is an important component of it. So that's the rehabilitative aspect. But absolutely, at the end of the day, rehabilitation is not necessarily my role. Rehabilitation is the role of the judge. It's the role of the individual person who wants to better themselves. My role is to vindicate the interests of the community to make sure that people are held accountable. So do I think there's room for that? Absolutely. But my vision for Mason County would be, at least from the prosecutor's standpoint, is accountability.
Okay. All right. So would that be, and I don't know if you've come up with a slogan for yourself at all, but if you had to, and I'll put you on the spot for just a moment, what would be your slogan? What would be, what's that one or two sentence phrase for Jordan?
Yeah, so my wife and I have gone over this time and time again.
Okay.
She's kind of the PR guru, but what I had kind of boiled it down to is let my results speak for themselves.
Okay.
Right. So if there was a slogan that I had to use, that would be the one.
Okay.
I want, at the end of the day, I can stand here and I can use as many words as I want. I can talk and talk and talk. At the end of the day, the results are going to speak for themselves. And if I'm lucky enough to be elected as prosecutor at the end of those 4 years, the community is going to take a look at what I've done in those 4 years, and those results will dictate whether or not they're going to grant me another 4 years or not. And so that would be my slogan.
All right. So it sounds fair. I'll leave the last question as an open-ended question, and that is, and it sounded like you pretty much wrapped it up, but is there anything that we should ask you about or don't know about you that would be something that the community would want to know about you today?
At the risk of pitting half the county against me, I am a Michigan State fan.
Okay.
So
right.
There is that. Even my own family sometimes disagrees with that. But no, at the end of the day, I'm a small town guy. And I think that I fit in quite well here in Mason County, and so I hope to be able to continue working to better the community.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming in and chatting with us this morning. As mentioned, Jordan is going to be vying for this seat as the Mason County Prosecutor. There's two other candidates. We've invited the other candidates on the air with us. And then, further on as we get closer to the election, hopefully you'll come back on with those other candidates, and we'll have maybe a deeper conversation in regards to where you're at that point. If that's
Absolutely.
all right.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thank you, Jordan. It is 9:42 on 102.7 Mom FM and Hot Country Hits 99.9. Stick around. We've got more on the way in just a matter of moments. And if you missed any part of this segment, you can watch it on its entirety on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. It is 102.7 Mom FM and Hot Country Hits 99.9. More music on the way in just a little bit, and we're seeing outside that rain starting to wrap up a bit, so that's looking pretty good.